Hello, welcome to Path to Power. I love the music. We thought we were having a dance party earlier. We have such a lively bunch. You should have saw us in the speaker room. This is an amazing panel, and I'm so excited to be here. We'll let some other people filter in and grab a seat before we start. When we talk about women's leadership, I know most of you are feeling probably a lot of hope, but also a lot of frustration, right? We still face challenges. Some days it's like, I have the power. We're moving forward. There's so much change, so much to look forward to. And other days, are we still having this conversation over and over? So, today on the path to power, we're going to get real. We're going to have a really lively conversation about what challenges we face and how are we all going to move forward together? How are we going to create the change and how are we going to lift all of us up? But I want us to stay hopeful. We have made so much progress. Can you believe 50 years ago that women couldn't open their own bank account or their credit card in their own name? We have made advancements in leadership. Companies are listening. We are doing great. But there is a reality that we face. The broken rung still exists. Many of us face challenges, and our workplace experiences are not the same. So I'm Angela Chee. I'm a communication coach, I'm a speaker, and I'm the author of The Power of the Only. And I believe that we can all own our voice and thrive in any environment. And I'm so excited to be joined by this fabulous panel, right? Joining us is Ebony Beckwith. She was a leader at Salesforce, and now she is mentoring and coaching the next generation of leaders. Can't wait to hear from you. Jevin Lennox, you've worked all over the world, and I love that he's a man on our panel. How many panels have you been on women's leadership that don't include men in the conversation, right? You've been a four-time chief people officer, and you work for women-led companies as well as three times. So he knows women, right? And he will have he will have a lot of perspective to share. Thank you for being here. And Bex Port, she's a global HR leader, accomplished, has worked all over Europe and Asia, and so she will have a very unique perspective and a lot to share. Dr. Teresa Watts, I love her shoes. She's sparkling. Woo! Right? She works at the intersection of HR and DEI, and she has so much to contribute, and you really create HR departments that work. So let's get started. All right. Before we dive into the topic of women's leadership, I really want to get a sense of who each of our panelists are. Ebony, you talked about decoding corporate culture. What does that mean? And you also said there's also a secret or a blueprint to success. What is that?
Well, first of all, thank you, Angela. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. And hopefully, one day we can crush this and not have to be having this conversation. But, I think that I think when it comes to success, I do want to say that there's no one size fits all when it comes to success. And that's because it's unique to everyone. But I do think that success is not a secret. I think success is more of a strategy and a mindset, and I think that's really important because I think anyone can learn it. And there are a few things that I think that are fundamental for everyone, and I'll share those things. And once you have those, I think then it becomes an individualized plan for everyone. But here are some basics that I think anyone can master. And one is just owning your own space, because I think how you show up is just as important as what you know. Second is like leverage the system, you know, learn how to move and learn how to like know what's going on within your own corporation. And then we're in Vegas. So the third one is like a Vegasism. Bet on yourself before anyone else does. You know, learn how to know what that title you want and then act like you have it. So bet on yourself. Because let's be real, no one's handing out titles, no one's handing out success. So you got to learn how to shoot your shot and take it.
I love that so much. And I think we're in a room full of HR leaders, people concerned about the future of work. So there are things that we can do within the system, within our workplaces, but ultimately we have our own agency. So thank you for giving us that roadmap that you can control it to an extent. And we're going to learn some deep dive on some strategies. Jevin, you've had such a global experience. You've worked in so many industries across different countries. What is your experience being at a women-led organizations, and how has that made a difference?
I've now worked at 3 companies in a row with women founder CEOs, My husband says that I know what I like at work, which is a woman in charge. Uh, One of the things that I think has been really interesting for me to see across these organizations, what is different or what can be possible when you are a part of an organization that is led by a woman who founded and is in CEO position, but also actually your executive team is gender balanced, which is also something that I've seen in my last several companies. And the first, probably more obvious point is just it is role modeled from the top, right? You see a woman in charge, you see an executive team that is gender balanced, and that just creates a sense of possibility, a sense of excitement. It attracts talent. The number of women who said, "I applied to this company, it was my top choice because it is a woman founder CEO, because I looked on the executive team page and I saw an equal number of women faces looking back at me." That's incredibly powerful, and it creates an obvious flywheel. The second thing that I think is more subtle, which is probably equally powerful, is that sense of possibility then permeates the organization because, unfortunately, just because you have a CEO woman founder, CEO founder woman, and just because you have a gender balanced executive team doesn't mean that every single team across the company is gender balanced. It doesn't mean that every level of leadership is gender balanced and so on, right? But because you could already see from the top what is possible, I think it empowers people to say, "Why can't we do that over here in this part of the organization? What's going wrong over here?" And that sense of possibility is very different than I think other organizations where it just feels, so far from what is possible because of where the reality is today.
I love that perspective. That representation matters. It kind of gives you that guidepost, but doesn't mean that individually in each department, in each of your individual companies, that there aren't things to work through, right? That they can model that leadership. Thank you so much. Bex, you've worked in India, Singapore, UK, and now here in the US. What is that global perspective? How has that added to your leadership experience and what you contribute?
Yeah, I think across the globe, like you say, we've made advancements in women's leadership, but I think in some countries we're breaking the glass ceiling. In other countries, it feels like running through a brick wall. And in India, there's been significant advancements, especially in the tech sector and finance sector of female leadership. But there's still incredible challenges in terms of women's expectations on women. Likewise, in Singapore, the government is very committed to diversity and female advancement. But for many of the sort of international companies, the top seats are not held by women, but they're also not held by Singaporeans. So there's another challenge in that market. The UK, significant advancements in pay transparency and reporting on pay, but there's still a huge gap. They were very committed a few years ago to women on boards, but they've still not quite hit that sort of 30% on public company boards. And so I think as I look across all the markets that I've worked in, there's probably a couple of things that stand out. Like across all the markets, what I've seen is that invisible workload. And I often talk about like a lot of women have two jobs, right? One is their day job and their other is everything else. And that seemingly feels universal. The other sort of thing that I think is really challenging for female leadership across the globe is likability versus competence, right? So a man can show up and be highly competent, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's great, it's great." Whereas a woman does exactly the same, and everyone's like, I'm not quite so sure." And we have to be likable, right? But if we're too likable, we're not seen as competent enough, and if we're too competent enough, we're not seen as likable. So we have to be likable badasses while our male peers get to be brilliant jerks, right? And so I've seen that sort of difference that definitely, in my experience, still exists.
And it's so important to acknowledge that because and we'll get to challenges in a bit because when we acknowledge what we're actually dealing with, because we used to be on panels where they just be more confident, just do this, just be more likable. And it doesn't always work because you have a different experience in each environment you're in, each boss you have may be different. So it's important to know where our challenges lie, but also know that we can navigate it. So thank you. Teresa, so we've talked earlier about she works at the intersection of HR and DEI, and there's a lot of people that are very anxious. It's a very uncertain time, especially for DEI and diversity and all that. You said something very grounding on an earlier call. Can you give me your perspective on what's happening right now?
Well, you're gonna, sorry guys, feel my bleeding heart. Um, I'm very empathetic because right now, we all know that everyone is feeling a bit anxious and they're feeling a bit depressed and sad. It's because one of the things that are going on and because of the things that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day. So that anxiety is there. So what do you do about it? So you talk to your leaders at your organizations. And then, yes, we're going to say that we have to create a culture where, everyone is accepted, where women are promoted, where everyone is inclusive. But yes, organizations have a responsibility and we have to hold them accountable. But you're here for me today that I'm going to hold you accountable for a lot of things. And it's more than just, and I love what it said, it's more than just talking about being confident. It's about taking the action for who you are and where you want to be, how you want to see yourself. You said imagine who you want to be. You want to be that CEO, you start acting like that CEO. So it's more than that. So today we're going to discuss those actionable steps. But with women, I talk to you all the time about you have to know what it is you want, right? So it starts with the organization and the individual. So you have to be a mentor for yourself, as well as find a mentor for others, as well as mentoring. I'm sorry, finding a mentor for yourself as well, advocating for yourself. So then the question becomes, how do those two organizations and the individual work together to create pathways for women that don't seem like an uphill battle? Are you freaking tired? I know I am. But it seems more like it's just a natural progression. So that's what I want to talk about today. How do we do that? How is it a natural feeling in an organization to move up that ladder?
Thank you so much for that perspective. I loved her energy on the call, and I'm sure you'll feel the energy from all our panelists. And they're so experienced and knowledgeable. And I do want to give a piece of hope. I just came from the Catalyst Conference Awards, and I think it's really important to note that every organization is different. Every situation you have is different. So you need to apply it in the way that applies to your life and have agency. But there are a lot of companies that are doing amazing things for women, for diversity, for inclusion. And so I want to stay hopeful while we continue to navigate all these challenges. So now let's talk about those challenges. Bex, let's start with you. You are an HR leader, but you're also a woman in leadership. Talk about some of the real challenges that maybe you personally face or have faced, and maybe some of how your people, what are they facing? Like, what's the biggest challenge facing women in leadership right now?
One of the big, I mean, I think, like you said, there's multiple challenges, but I do think that one of the biggest challenges is representation. It is still, and this stat may be 12 months out of date, but it's still pretty shocking that you are more likely to be called David than you are to be an S&P 500 CEO of an S&P 500 company, right? And be a woman, right? And I think that that matters. And my experience of working with great female leaders is that they attract great female employees, and there is, just the benefits go out from there. And so my biggest thing right now is really looking at representation and really trying to drive that home and have balanced boards, balanced C suites.
I love that. And as a person in power, you're able to do that now and make sure that that voice gets heard in those rooms where people are looking at, does this reflect what we want it to reflect? Ebony, we were talking earlier about some of the challenges of even if you get people up to certain levels, at some point people aren't thriving and they burn out. Now you work with a lot of leaders. You're a coach now. What have you seen, or maybe either personally or with your clients, of what are the challenges they're really facing at this moment?
I think access is still a huge challenge for women. We're not in the rooms where decisions are being made. People are being tapped on the shoulders, and it's not us typically because we're not on golf courses and we're not in the sports clubs and then the places where the decision makers are, making those big decisions. I think, as was said, we're exhausted. Um, we have there's a lot of invisible labor, as was mentioned earlier, that's thrown on us. In addition to our full-time jobs, we are taking on the work of mentoring, coaching, emotional support, additional ERG work, you name it. And that's not just at work, but we have additional workload at home that we're doing. So ask any woman, and if she's not exhausted, I just wait a week. You know, take off, take a vacation, and you're like, "Whew, I didn't really know I was tired." So I think we are burnt out, and oftentimes don't even recognize the symptoms until it's a little too late. And that affects our performance. If you're not feeling well, you can't work at peak performance. And so taking the time to recognize that is the healthy thing to do. And then, so addition to barriers, our balance, our emotional balance, we are, there's just this heavy tax that's put on us. And then we're walking this tightrope. It was also mentioned, we're expected to be strong, but not too strong, nice, but not too nice. So we're expected to just juggle all these things and still perform. These systems are broken and they have to change for us. And so for my clients, it's what I love helping people do is decode what's happening within corporate America so that we can thrive. There's this invisible language that exists for all employees, but especially for women and women of color. There are these landmines that we have to navigate. And for some, they're huge. For others, they might be minor, but knowing how to successfully, traverse it can be critical.
Thank you, and I don't want you to get discouraged because I think it's important for us to know these challenges so that we can navigate it, and I think it's important to recognize the external barriers so you don't take it as an internal barrier. Right? Because there's studies that show that when you take something external and you internalize it as a personal flaw, it actually affects your performance. So we're gonna lay it all out, and then we're gonna give you some tips, so don't be
That's
discouraged.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, no, but we
yeah.
have to understand it's like we can talk about everybody's great and all that, and we've had those panels, and it's International Women's Month, right? It's Women's History Month, but we have to get real first so we can dive deeper and then take responsibility for the things that we can honor when you've reached your limit and you really need to protect your energy and protect yourself.
Can I just add, this
Yes.
system is broken. We are not broken.
Yeah. And we can contribute to fixing it, but we have to honor where we're at. Thank you so much. Jevin, what initiatives do you think are working? Are there things that are, even though there's challenges, have there been challenges that you've seen for your workforce of what's not working and what is working?
Yeah, so one thing that a number of organizations I've been part of has looked at very seriously is progression of women through promotion and development, right? And so there's a basic, the data tells a story, right? You just what is representation at each level, and then as you look at each promotion cohort, how does that shake out in terms of looking at it across demographics? And lo and behold, in some situations, we found that we were not gender balanced in those promotion cohorts in the way we wanted to be. And what ended up being really powerful for us, the first thing that we did was really just to elevate to managers. Here are all the folks that you have on your team. Here is their tenure. Here is the amount of time that they've been in a certain role, and here are their roles and levels. So you can think about them in cohorts, because what was happening was some people are front of mind because for whatever reason they are just more visible in terms of the work that they do or because they advocate for themselves, right? And others were not. And so, unsurprisingly, some people were being left behind, or at least were not being considered. And so, the simple act of just raising people to consideration is like, hey, just look across. Use the data to look across and remind yourself, who may I not be thinking of? And what we found was then these unsung heroes are the folks who are not necessarily out in front grabbing the spotlight, but who are tremendously talented and worthy of promotion. It equalized, right? So you see that over time, and the data just becomes how you do things. The other thing that I think was really cool to see is you then really develop this habit among your leadership. Because the promotion story is one of not the easiest story, but it is one where the data tends to be more extensive and you can really look at it. There are other more subtle things around stretch projects or informal leadership roles that are not necessarily as easy to measure in organizations, but rely on the same way of thinking and way of doing. And now that we've gotten managers to think in that way, you also see that, sort of halo effect spreading on other places. So it's I really think coming back to starting with data in a way that feels less um charged. I mean, data can still be charged, but but I find if you're in the right organization, starting with data often is a helpful place to be, and then you can get into the behaviors behind.
And I also think what that does is it allows you to gently help people recognize their bias. I want to promote this man because he has shown this great leadership. Great. Tell me more about that. What does that look like? Why is that great leadership? Where is that different? And really make somebody kind of think that through. And that may be conscious or unconscious in their bias, but really making somebody, okay, I have to rationalize this. And now let's look at this woman. Well, she hasn't shown great leadership. Okay, why? Tell me more about that. And so I find this like notion of finding those ways to press on that helps build that muscle of, okay, I need to think this through a bit more rather than go with this like, oh, these assumptions and biases that people have or leaders have.
I love that perspective. I think for us, being in the room changes the room, and then you add that extra value and pointing things out that maybe someone hasn't seen before, and then it becomes part of the initiative or the system. But first, you have to introduce it where people haven't seen it. They're like, "Oh, I didn't see it that way." But I love how, as HR leaders, you can start to incorporate initiatives and things into the system that make workplaces work for everyone. And if they work for women, it ends up working for everyone. Um, Teresa, what are your thoughts on, for women of color, the stats are always slightly different. And now intersectionality, women are not just one group. There's different experiences. Challenges have you seen or ways that um, can counteract some of the unconscious biases that are out there for women of color?
Yes, women of color, but also too, I focus on, yes, there's an attack I think on women of color is difficult. Okay, there's this, the battle is a little bit harder. But I think sometimes too, when we focus on getting the right mentorship, you talk about the unsung heroes, and I love what you said that there's so many unsung heroes out there that you can pull on and you can put the spotlight on and show everything that they do. Um, Let me give you this example. I'm going to be real petty here for a second. So, we talked earlier about how sometimes you can get I've had opportunities where I'm only allowed to get so high, right? You may not necessarily hit that glass ceiling, but you're bumping your head, or you get closer and closer to it, and someone sees you starting to shine a little bit more, and they pull it away from you. They're like, oh no, she's doing too much, she's getting too much. And that has happened for me. And I've seen that happen to other women. And so what I did was I started I got real petty one night and because I was really hurt. So I came in the next day and I thought, you know what? I'm going to create an opportunity for women to shine. It just happened to be during Black History Month. Um, I'm in HR. So pulling in celebrities and things like that, that's a marketing role. So it's not my role, but I did. I pulled in this big celebrity and the ROI for organization was big, big publicity, big campaign. I did it. So I thought, you know what? I did deserve a parade for that. But did I get one? No. Okay. I got sit down, go back to HR. Thank you for signing that contract. So the very next day I came in, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create opportunities for women to talk about what it is they can do. So because it happens to be Black History Month, I started with women of color. Then it grew to women in general, and it's called 1 Minute to Boast. I got up and I stood in front of my CEO and everyone. I said, you know what, women, why don't you guys stand up here? I'm going to give you 1 minute to talk about something great that you have done. 1 minute. And oh my God, was he mad? But I didn't care. So so he was mad, and then I saw the faces of the other men in the room too, and they were like, "What the heck is going on?" So then it just started like this thing we did every Thursday. Hey, women, I'm going to give you 1 minute to talk about something exceptional about yourself, something that you did that you're proud of, because one day you're going to be so proud. You're going to be so successful. Someone's going to knock your rung off of your ladder. Someone's going to take a step away from you. So I need you to be able to stand back up and talk about it. So we started this 1 minute to boast. And now I have men allies calling me, asking me, hey, I want you to teach my wife how to do this. I want you to come and talk to my daughter. I did it in a high school, about it in a high school. They want to come to organizations to do it as well. We're going to say,
I feel like we need to see what this looks like in action. Can you demonstrate?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
starting now because okay, 19. Hey, I'm Teresa. I started with an organization that had just come out of two bankruptcies. No one wanted to work for us. No one wanted to be a vendor for us. So then what I did was I evolved the HR processes. I came in, I hired people, I trained the right people. I got us from an organization. When I first started there, it was a $250 million organization. I got us in 2 years to a $550 million organization. I do think that my role in HR was pivotal in that. Who hired the people? Who brought the programs? Who made it so that people wanted to work for us? My team did that. Who built the HR team? My HR team was the one who did that. So hell yeah, I'm boasting.
Let's give a round of applause. Let's give a round of
That's
applause
something that you guys should all learn to do.
for everyone in this room. We need to celebrate our wins. It's so important. You know what? And there's science behind it. When you celebrate your wins, it reinforces your acknowledgement of yourself, and that raises your endorphins, the happiness, and allows you to be more productive. So thank you for reminding us to celebrate all our wins. Let's applause for everyone in here for just being part of Transform and contributing to your growth. It's so important. Now let's get into some strategy. So we have the boasting. Bex, we know we didn't all start like this. I used to have, glasses, a bowl cut, raised by Asian immigrant parents. How did we, riding around on my big wheel? Um, how did we get here? How do you just step into your power? It doesn't just happen overnight. It's a series of things and experiences in your life. What was it like for you? When was there a pivotal moment in your life, Bex, where you said, I'm stepping into my power? And how did you continue to do that? Do you have any strategies for people to step into their power?
Yeah, I think moments of learning, as much as I'd love to tell you sort of something big and dramatic, I don't know that they are big and dramatic. I think that they're often kind of smaller moments. And when I was 17, I was learning to drive. And the way that you learn to drive in England, I'm sure it's the same here. You get somebody who can drive and has a driver's license to drive with you. And it was Christmas Day. And in England on Christmas Day, we eat a lot and we drink a lot. And so I said, I'll drive my grandparents home. And everyone was like, great. And so they drank a lot and we get in the car. And halfway through the journey, this is like rural England, country roads, it starts to snow, right? Well, nobody's coming out to clean the roads because they've all drank a lot too, right? So like we're driving along and I'm getting closer and closer to the wheel. And my mom sat there and she's like, hey, Bex, like sit back and look up. I know you're scared and I know you're stressed, but it's okay. You got to sit back and look up. You got to keep your eye on the center of the road and look back. And I'm here. And then from the back, there's my grandparents. They're like, you got this, Bex. Yeah, keep going, Bex. And so I'm like, okay, sit back and look. And for me, there were like a couple of lessons in that. Like, number one, you've always got to keep looking up, right? No matter how hard it gets, because this shit's really hard, right? And it's really easy to shrink down and to feel wall out and to feel exhausted. But you got to keep your head up and keep your eye on the prize. You also, everything you do, you need a co-pilot, right? And you need somebody else to help you navigate that journey. It is not a solo sport. And then you got to have your cheer squad. You got to surround yourself with people that will just cheer you on no matter what. And the great thing about leadership and on the path to leadership is that you get to do all three of those things for other people too. It's not just about your own cheer squad, it's about cheering other people on. It's about being other people's co-captains, and it's about helping each other look up and see what we can't see when it might actually be right in front of us. And that to me is the kind of lessons in leadership that as a shit scared 17-year-old I learned.
I love
I'll be your co-pilot any day.
I'll be the
We're
cheer.
huggers in this group. We were all hugging. Circle. No, we'll do that after. You guys can join us. I think it's so important for us to be in those rooms. pop culture narratives about women being catty. I'm so sick of all the shows. I mean, I worked in television news and it was a very competitive field and it was feeling like very isolating, but we supported each other in certain moments. And I think it's important to be in those rooms where we constantly start to change the narrative of supporting each other. Oh, you're doing this, having the promoting yourself and also supporting each other.
And there was a question in the chat of like, and I can't find it now because there's too many words.
It
And I
was about women being catty, I feel
But
like,
it was about like, what do you do when people are not helping you shine? Like,
and that's real.
find those people, right? Like, I think it's really, really important that you surround yourself with people that want to help each other shine. And as women, one of the biggest ways we can get more women into leadership is to help each other shine. When one of us shines, we all shine.
I think you'll find that there are more women who want to help you shine than more women who want to push you down. You really are. You find the 10 women who will support you and ignore the chick on the side who got her own drama going on. Because eventually she'll see the success that you're having with others and she'll come around. I've learned that. She'll want to be a part of it. And she'll learn that in order for me to be a part of that fantastic group, I have to change who I am. So then I do think you do have a responsibility that once they recognize it, then you bring them in and say, okay, yeah, you were something, but let me let me show you what you need to be. Let me bring you in, and then, but just hold
It's
tight to the women who want to help you.
it's important to role model it and be in that space. And we did have questions. We might have room at the end. So if you guys have been putting in questions, we'll try to get to some more at the end. Ebony, I know you have some strategies to share. How do we really step into our power? I know you had something you wanted to add. I could tell.
Oh, I did. Uh, I think for me, I learned early on in my career that visibility was my currency. I am a naturally shy person, even though I love, love, love people. Um, I am a natural introvert. I'm a learned extrovert. And in business, though, you have to be out there. If you wanna get ahead, if you wanna navigate your way up to the top, I navigated my way into the C-suite. I had to be out there. I couldn't be silent in the rooms where things were happening, and I had wonderful advocates and mentors and bosses who were like, "Speak up. I didn't invite you to this meeting to be quiet, Ebony." Her name was Crystal Downing, and I always tell
I
that
love that voice,
you know,
right?
that
The
yeah.
advocating for you.
But she was like, "Why didn't you say anything? I brought you to this meeting not so you could be an observer. I wanted you to be a participant." And I mean, I've sat through hundreds of meetings in my career and didn't say anything, but that didn't get me anywhere. But the meetings where I spoke up and the meetings that I prepared in advance and I networked with other people and I had allies and you know, was able to ask the intelligent question and get my voice in the room and the space, those were the meetings where leadership took notice. And I also, aligned myself with the power movers in the company, people that could advocate for me when I wasn't there. So making yourself visible, making sure that that is your currency was something that I coach my clients on to this day and the people that I mentor, making sure they're not silent. I mean, if you have nothing to say and you genuinely don't have anything to add, then don't say anything. But your preparation is your biggest key in that space.
I so appreciate that perspective, and it is a learned skill. I said that I had just recently wrote my book, The Power of the Only, and I spent about 4 or 5 years interviewing onlys about how they stepped into their power and owned their voices. And so many people came from shy backgrounds, and it's a cultivated skill. You can create the leadership in your life. It doesn't have to happen overnight. It starts with small steps. It doesn't have to be huge, but it is something that can be learned. I think we created ourselves by peeling back those layers to get to what your core is. So thank you for that reminder. Jevin, male ally. Thank you for being here. But what can men do to be part of this conversation? What are some of the things that others can contribute or even HR organizations to help contribute to women's leadership?
I think when you shared this question, you said, and also not be a performative ally, which is helpful to call out because I think there can be a super performative, I support women. I have a daughter. I have a wife. Like, cool. Like, you only support equal rights because you have a blood relative. That's awesome. And so, words are words, right? And actions are actions. And so, really, the way to be an ally is to use your power on behalf of women who need that support to break through the system, right? And I think depending on the role that those men have in the organization, or by the way, not even just within organizations, but I think one really important thing that I think women can do is to really cultivate a supportive network outside of the organizations that they're in, right? So there's lots of ways actually that men can play that role, but within an organization, you can help create systems and processes and ways of working that truly are equitable. And, if you're in a position like mine or Beck's, that could mean that you have an opportunity to actually architect that. But even if you're, a line manager in a particular or a functional leader or something, right? I sort of say, clean your house. As the rest of the organization is not perfect yet, but cool, be the best shining light of this work and be the best place that women or other representative groups can possibly be at in your part of the organization. Like, be a beacon for what is possible. And I've seen this really happen. You see, this what is going on with that team. Like we got to copy that. We got to, take everything that leader is doing and bring it over to other parts of the organization. And so there are lots of ways that I think male allies can do this, but they gotta go do the work.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about kind of within the organizations, like initiatives that you see that are working that, a lot of men, it's hard. It's an uncomfortable conversation. There's, International Women's Day, there's this, and there's been a little bit of a backlash. How are ways to involve them in the conversations and what has worked in your company?
I think it is about finding ways for those male leaders to really lean in on the work that needs to be done, right? So again, I think the biggest thing is to have a male leader call out, in a promotion process or when you're considering two different candidates done to take, a really critical project of, hey, we haven't thought about this person, and she's amazing. Like, why aren't we talking about this person, right? Or to say, to be the first to call out the data and say we've got work to do. And I think that I'm going to push hard that we should be uncomfortable and take this kind of next step that maybe no one is really wanting to lean into. Um, it's it's not to say that I think the visible shows of support around particular months or holidays and things like that aren't important because I do think the visible expressions of support for male ally leaders are really important. But for me, the work of the work is where people really need to be accountable. And I think women, they see the receipts, right? They're kind of like, I don't care if you stood up in front of an all hands and said how big a supporter you are, like, that sorry, pardon my friends, like, you're not doing that shit in, like, behind the scenes, right? And so that, again, I think is where, we as men need to hold ourselves accountable, for doing the work.
Bex, you've been a global HR leader. What can organizations do? What are some initiatives that actually get real specific? I mean, we can own our voice and own our power, but what's happening within the organizations?
Look, I've seen where you can get really successful with this when you make it performative, like you make performance or you tie it to performance. Like great leadership is having really diverse, inclusive teams, right? And so, you can tie bonus payments to it, you can tie performance evaluations to it, right? And that has to come from the CEO, the board, all the way from the top saying this matters and we are going to hold you account for being a great leader because this is not it's not a women's issue, it's a system issue, it's a leadership issue, right? And so I think getting real accountability into like, hey, I want to see balanced hiring slates, and if you don't have balanced hiring slates for senior roles, then I don't want to see all one gendered candidate or one race candidates, right? um you can, again, promotions, like who's getting promoted in your group? What are the evaluations, the engagement scores for different genders in your group? And that matters and that's a problem and you've got to fix it. That I think then drives accountability because I don't think there is any one kind of particular thing that you can do. There's a whole series of things together. But if you've got leadership accountability and performance looks like diverse, inclusive environments, then I think you start making progress.
And I think it's so important, and research has shown that it's good for the bottom line, it's good for business. It's
Exactly.
not like they're doing us any favors. It's really a
Progress isn't linear, but I do think that we've made significant progress, that we are no longer having those conversations of like, well, why does this matter again, right? Like there is a full acceptance of, the more diverse a team is, the better the ideas and innovation that come out of that team and the better the performance. Like that's just fact now.
Thank you so much. We have about a little bit more than 5 minutes. I want to start with Teresa. What is the one thing, we'll go down the line. What's the one thing that you want people to walk away with from today about women's leadership?
Well, I'll give you 4 points. One, I always talk to myself, and I seriously do. And at the end of the day, I always say, Teresa, did you soar today? Or if I go into a situation, I go, I'm gonna soar. I got this ego. But soar, SOAR. My S is like, did I stand up for myself? Did I speak? Did I step out? Did I stand up for myself? The O, did I own my own uniqueness? Did I, own my career? Did I navigate myself? The A, was I authentic? Did I show authentic leadership? Your leadership path and your style doesn't have to be the same as anyone else. Was I Teresa Watts today when I stood up for myself? And R, did I take a risk? It is more than, okay, taking that stretch assignment at church. Did you go up to that person and say, hey, I like what you do. Teach me how to do it. All right. I'm not happy with my job right now. I want to do something else. So did you take a risk? Did you soar today?
Did you soar? Did all of us soar? Thank you. Bex?
I go back to finding ways to help each other shine. Like I am a huge proponent of shine theory. And so, one thing I would leave you all with is, constantly think about like, how are you helping other people, other women shine, right? And that energy will come back, right? And we are so much better collectively together.
So there's this book and article out now called "The Broken Rung." If you're not don't want to read the entire book, you can just read the Harvard Business Review article. It's a little bit faster. But it sort of points out this really, kind of horrifying fact, which is, we are now gender balanced. And I think actually in many disciplines, actually, more women are graduating from college, university. And yet, at the second you get into the workforce and as you progress in career, gender balance goes up, kind of off a cliff at every sort of step and turn. And why are all the reasons for that? Um, they talk about women needing to build experiences in their career through taking certain bold and big moves, right, that show that they're expanding their range and all the things. And I won't sort of read the article to you. The thing that I think is really important to think about is, are you in an ecosystem and are you surrounded by people who will help you be successful with those big moves? Right. And I think it's kind of goes back to the lean in, be courageous, like take big risks with your career, like and get shoved off a glass cliff, like not okay. Right. There are unfortunately some places that are going to say, good on you for taking that risk. See what happens. And there are other places that say, we are going to do our damnedest to make you successful. And I think there are lots of ways you can think about who are those managers, who are those teams, who are those organizations, but use your antenna and make sure that you're looking for it.
Thank you.
I'm struggling because I don't want this to come off as a Debbie Downer statement, but I want this to come off as extremely empowering. And I'm going to say this for the maybe one person in the room who needs to hear this. Okay. So take this as empowering. I think far too often some of us stay in roles or stay in companies that do not value us. So if that is you and you are in a place that does not value your leadership, does not value your true worth, you are knocking at doors that are not opening for you at your company, stop knocking. Change roles, change industries, start your own thing, but refuse to stay somewhere that does not value your worth. And I say that, because you deserve not only a seat at the table, but you deserve a seat at the right table. So I say that with a spirit of just hope and independence and empowerment for all of you.
Thank you. Yes. And I so appreciate that conversation. We're not telling you to leave your companies, but I but I think what's happening is that we've had these panels. Like we've said, we're going to get real here. And I've been I'm a woman. I've navigated competitive spaces, all of us have, and we've heard over and over these different things. Lean in, get more experience, be more confident. And you're like, I am confident. I am bold. And so we just need to start to acknowledge what are the real limitations, what's internal, what's external, what companies support us, what companies don't. And if you're in a situation, sometimes you're not in the privileged situation where you can just leave, and you shouldn't have to. You can make the space where you are. So thank you for all those ways of working within industries to own your voice, own your power, and the strategies. But there comes a time where you have agency, right? We have to look for companies and create companies that support women in leadership, that support everyone for inclusion and belonging, that we feel safe to continue to thrive. So thank you for the super powerful conversation. We did run out of time for questions unless they want us to go longer, but we will be at the back of the room to continue the conversation. And I will also, if you'd like to hear more about the power of the only, at the bar. Um, the power of the only, how to own your voice and thrive in any environment. I'm going to be talking a lot more about thriving at the Learning Lab tomorrow at 11 o'clock, because all of you can continue to own your voice and thrive. And with these leaders sitting here, thank you so much for your wisdom and insight. I so appreciate you, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much.